This is the five biggest restaurant mistakes destroying profit margins right now. I'm really proud to say that my flagship restaurant and other restaurants that I've owned have had a 24 to 26% net profit. They say you're doing well in this business if you can ring a 10 to 12% net profit on sales. What does that mean? That means that for every dollar of sales, you're only making 10 to 12 cents profit. Okay. And margins are shrinking all the time. I don't need to tell you that. Labor costs are higher than they've ever been. Inflation, unless you own 100 restaurants and you've got leverage and economies of scale, you're at the mercy of the markets. They're volatile. Okay. What we're going to talk about today is going to give you ideas that'll maximize your restaurant profit and stop the profit leaks. Let's start with your KPIs, your key performance indicators. They're critical numbers, and you really need to have a feel for the cash flow of your business because cash is king, okay? And it's the lifeblood of your business. When I ran these restaurants, it's like I obsessed over this stuff. I looked at all the KPIs on a weekly basis, and I stayed in what I call your restaurant sweet spot. I'm going to talk more about that. But first and foremost, let's talk about prime cost. Now, that's a misunderstood, sort of a term that not everybody knows, not everyone's heard of it, but it is kind of an industry benchmark. What does this mean? Prime cost is the sum total of your food, your beverage, and your labor cost expressed as a percentage. Now, there's a formula for that. We're going to go over that in detail. To get an accurate food and beverage cost, though, you must start with taking inventory. Now, you've heard me talk about this, until I'm blue in the face, but so many restaurants think taking inventory is placing next week's orders, and that couldn't be further than the truth. Taking inventory means calculating the true value of your goods on hand, your food and your beverage at any given point in time. Now, I've always recommended that restaurants take inventory, and I'm talking about physical counts, 4 weeks in a row, because you want consistency. You want to find out what your sweet spot is. What is your food cost sweet spot? What is your beverage cost sweet spot? And you want to stay there every time you go through this inventory cycle each week. Once you get there, once you find that consistency, then and only then do I suggest you go to a 30-day inventory, okay? Yes, there's a little bit of time involved here. There's a little bit of labor involved here, but nothing is more important because there's so much waste and spoilage and potential loss and theft of your goods on hand, okay, in your restaurant. I don't need to tell you, depending on the size of your place, you could have $10,000 worth of food or even more. You could have $5,000 or $8,000 worth of alcohol and beverages or maybe more. And it's just sitting around until you sell it, until you get what we call throughput. You could be losing money every single day. So it's vitally important to take accurate physical inventory. Now, I've got a template for this. I'll tell you about it later. It's a turnkey system. When's the best time, the most efficient time to take inventory? At the end of a busy weekend, because obviously it only makes sense that you take inventory when your goods levels are at the absolute lowest. So if you're really busy on Fridays and Saturdays, like most of our restaurants are, and even Sunday, at the end of that weekend, when your levels are at the absolute lowest, it's the easiest and most efficient time to count it. Again, I've got a template for this. We're going to calculate your value of your costs, your food and your beverage costs, okay? All right. Physical inventory is not placing orders. Okay, let's talk about consistency. All right, it's also consistent to calculate your labor cost and find your labor cost sweet spot week after week after week. Now, I always calculated labor 2 different ways. Your overall payroll cost is all the wages you pay, what you pay yourself as an owner if you take money out of the business, what you pay your leaders, your dining room leader, your kitchen leader, your managers. A lot of you call them managers. I call them leaders, but you get it. Anyone that takes money out of the business. And then there's the payroll taxes and the payroll fee if you pay a payroll processor to process it. That's your overall labor cost. I also used to calculate it the second way, which is kitchen labor cost. Why? Because I don't need to tell you this either. Kitchen wages are the absolute highest we've ever had to pay. So you need to track your labor costs also. So let's talk about what consistency means there. Imagine there's a sweet spot where, based on the optimal scheduling, okay, you've got just enough people to deliver great service, put out great product, based on a volume of sales. When you hit that number, and that's your sweet spot as a percentage, maybe that's 28% labor cost. You will calculate it. But once you get there, you know it's possible to do that week after week. If your business is fairly consistent in terms of sales volume dollars, then you know that there's an optimum schedule, an optimum labor cost that's going to hit that sweet spot, 28% or whatever, week after week. And you need to track these things. And if you have a week where sales are pretty close to what it was last week or the week of your sweet spot, and then all of a sudden your labor is 3 or 4 points higher, you got to dive in and investigate what caused the spike. Again, I've got a template for this. We'll talk about it later. All right, moving on. What's prime cost? I told you it's the sum total of your food, your beverage, and your labor costs. Okay, and the formula, of course, is food cost percentage plus beverage cost percentage divided by 2, because you average your cost of goods and then you add your labor cost percentage. What's the benchmark? The sweet spot here with prime cost. The industry says that to be successful, to make profit in this business, to do well, your prime cost should be somewhere between 50 and 55%. What does that mean? That means, once again, for every dollar of sales, 50 to 55 goes to food, beverage, and labor, which means you've got 45 or 50 cents left over to pay all your other expenses. And it's a long laundry list, okay? It goes on and on and on. You can pull out your invoices. You can, pull them out of the cloud of your file cabinet. We're going to get to that in a moment with daily break even, but you've got a lot of expenses, and 45 to 50 cents is left over to pay all of those. All right. Let's forget food costs for a moment. Okay, I mentioned it's an important part of prime cost. Yes, it is. And this industry is obsessed with food cost, if they even calculate it. But what you really should be obsessed with is profit. I talk about this all the time because you take profit to the bank, not food cost. And so many restaurateurs and so many general leaders, general managers, if you call them that, confuse food cost with profit, okay? And it's really about how much goes to your bottom line bank account. I would rather sell a 40% food cost steak or seafood dish all day long than a 28% pasta dish that contributes far less profit than the steak or the seafood. Are you getting this? That's important, all right? So be focused and be obsessed with profit. How do you get a low food cost? Efficient ordering, low waste, theft, and spoilage, lots of cash cows, things that deliver really high profit for very little cost, strong portion controls. All of these things are what give you a low food cost. But again, be focused on that, of course, but make sure that your profits are where you want them to be. All right. Next biggest thing, the biggest needle mover. Smithfield Culinary is dedicated to providing restaurants with the right protein for every plate and every day part. They understand that for meat lovers, enjoying a favorite cut is more than a meal, it's a memorable experience. Discover Smithfield's new ready-to-eat select bacon, designed to save chefs time with no mess left behind and no crumbs left on the plate. Or try their new ground chorizo, packed with bold, smoky flavor that brings the heat to any dish. Look to Smithfield for one of the most extensive pork portfolios available, including bacon, ham, sausage, and more, all your favorites. When you partner with Smithfield, you serve the food you love, and your guests will love what you serve. I've tasted Smithfield products at numerous restaurant shows, and they're consistently excellent and always delicious. For orders or additional information, visit smithfieldculinary.com/Smithfield. I already told you can't necessarily control inflation and rising costs and high labor wages that you're paying now. You don't have control over these things, but you can control menu profit. Now, I've consulted with so many clients, and it's amazing how much money they're leaving on the table in lost potential profit. Why? Because one, they haven't costed out their menus. They have no idea what it costs to serve this menu item to that guest in terms of ingredients only, not the labor, just the ingredients. And they randomly throw a price at it. Sometimes they look at what the competition is charging for the same dish or a similar dish, but they don't know what Harry down the street is using for ingredients, and they don't know what his labor and his overhead and all these other costs are. And it's really a mistake. Okay? So let's talk about costing out your menu. There's a template for this also. It's called a menu item plate cost, which means you break down every single menu item. It's reverse engineering. And based on every ingredient that goes into every dish, it has a cost attached to it based on a quantity of that ingredient that goes in that dish. You can get all this information from your invoices, your order guides, how the bulk product comes in the door, and then you reverse engineer what is the yield from that bulk product and how much of that yield goes on any individual plate that goes in front of a guest. It's simple math. You can do it with a pencil. You can do it with a calculator. You can do it with AI, for goodness sake, but you need to know. Once you've got that plate cost, it tells you a couple of things. It's going to tell you, one, the cost of the ingredients and what it costs you to serve that guest, that dish. It's also going to tell you what the profit is on that dish, and it's going to tell you what the food cost is on that dish. It's all simple math. Simple division and simple subtraction give you those things, either the profit for the dish or the percentage, the food cost percentage. But it's vitally important. So these restaurants that I've consulted with, imagine finding tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands in a year's time, because in just about every menu category, appetizers, soups, salads, pizzas, desserts, entrees, all those are categories. These restaurants have just randomly thrown prices at things. They haven't costed out their menus. And what we find out is that the lowest profit items are more popular sellers than the high profit items, what they want to sell, what they could be selling all day long. And they're leaving lots of money on the table, okay? These low profit items are stealing sales from what they want to sell, the most profitable items that actually drive the bottom line, okay? Impact revenue to your bank account. So that is vitally, vitally important. Again, I've got a template called the Menu Profit Accelerator that'll turnkey do all of this for you step by step. The last key performance indicator or KPI I want to talk about today is daily break even. So many restaurants I talk to on the road. I travel a lot. I speak at lots of restaurant industry shows across the country. And I speak to restaurant owners and I ask them questions. And a lot of them don't know how to calculate the daily break even. They've never done it. It's simple also. Imagine there are two types of costs. There are fixed costs and variable costs. Now, the fixed costs are what you absolutely must pay month after month with consistency, whether you're open 7 days a week or 5 days a week. It's things like your rent or your mortgage on the property. It's the dumpster in the parking lot. It's your insurance. These are things you've got to pay whether the restaurant is open or closed. It doesn't matter. Variable costs are the things that go up or down based on the number of days and hours you're open. Obviously, cost of goods is a variable cost. Your payroll is a variable cost. Your utilities, your electricity and your heating oil, if you have it, and your telephone, all those bills will go up or down based on the hours that your restaurant is open. Okay. Once you've got a list, and again, I mentioned the cloud. Some of you who have all of your important papers and documents and invoices stored in the cloud. Some of you got the old-fashioned file cabinet. It doesn't matter. Some of you have an office manager that handles all this for you, or an accountant. But you must assemble all of your invoices for a 30-day period. Every single thing that you spend on a weekly or a monthly basis, you break it down between, is this a fixed cost or is it a variable cost? And you put them in a list by the month. So if you order your food several times a week, you multiply every single purchase, okay, times 4 weeks. And then you divide all of that list by 30, and that gives you the daily break even. So what does that mean? That is the dollar amount that it costs you to put the key in the lock, open the door, turn the lights on, have food in the walk-in, ready to sell, have team on the floor, team in the kitchen, preparing the food, ready to serve the food, the lights on, the music up, the internet working, all the expenses, the dumpster in the parking lot. Okay, this is what it costs you just to open the doors. Whether you serve 5 guests that day or 500 guests that day, that is the basic daily break-even cost. Let me go a little bit further. Imagine on a Monday, it's your slowest day. And if you track your sales, maybe your slowest day is $800 in sales. That might be an extreme case. It might be accurate. Imagine every single Monday over history, you sell $800, $850, $800, $900, all that kind of stuff with consistency. And then you do this calculation and you find out your daily break even is $1,500. What does that tell you? You just lost $600 or $700 upside down because you're not even meeting that daily break even. Now, some restaurants think they've got to stay open 7 days a week, 24/7, because their guests will be disappointed if they just show up and the place is closed. No, you're wrong about that. You got to communicate your open hours once you figure out what days are your most profitable to open. If you close on a low profit day below your daily break even, okay, actually no profit day below your break even, you're losing money. You will actually lose less money by closing the doors than by being open with, serving 5 guests when you've got your labor on the floor and you got the lights on and the utilities and all that other stuff. What's the answer to this? My very first solution, or recommendation, I should say, is create a special promotion around your slowest day. It's not that hard to do, depending on your concept. Come up with some kind of a business driver. They used to call them loss leaders, whatever it was. I had this pizza night. You've heard me talk about this. I had a pizzeria, and our slowest night was Tuesday. So I came up with this idea, $5 pizza night. And we still made a little bit of money on the pizza, but we made a lot of money on the alcohol and on the retail merchandise we sold. And the kids would come in because it was a family night and we had an arcade and the kids would pump money into the arcade. You get the idea, okay? So think about it. If you can come up with Taco Tuesday or Pizza Night or whatever your theme is and drive more business, ladies' night, karaoke, whatever it is, try that first. And if that fails, if that absolutely does not work, then close that day or days and give your team the time off. They'll appreciate it and you'll lose less money by closing on that slow night than actually being open. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about staff training. What if your POS did more than ring up orders? What if it actually ran your restaurant? Touch Bistro is an all-in-one cloud-based POS and restaurant management system designed exclusively for restaurants. They help you run smarter, faster, and more profitably. Touch Bistro brings front of house, back of house, and guest engagement into one easy platform. From patented bill splitting and real-time inventory to labor, profit tracking, loyalty, online ordering, and reservations. It's all connected. Touch Bistro is built for restaurants and built to perform. For operators listening in the US or Canada, Touch Bistro is helping restaurants get started for less with savings on upfront costs for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Head to touchbistro.com/restaurant rockstars for more details and see how much you can save. I was obsessed with training, daily training. And it became fun because we made it fun, but it was so important. And it wasn't just about hospitality. Of course, that's the foundation of our business. And yes, guest service and hospitality are important. We taught our team the basics. But what was most important was salesmanship, teaching every guest-facing team member, every front of house person in product knowledge and restaurant knowledge. I didn't want anyone to be asked a question by a guest and say, I don't know, let me go ask my team leader. That was just a turnoff. That's a negative. I wanted every single person that interacted with the guest to be so knowledgeable that they can not only answer questions, but they could make recommendations that they knew our guests would enjoy and appreciate. I actually created this training system called Sales Stars. I'll tell you about that later. But anyway, it became fun. We had role playing. We had pop quizzes. It's like we had healthy competitions. But it was not uncommon that every single front of house person, whether they were the host that answered the phone and sat the guests at tables, to the bussers who could see that, a lady was had an empty glass of wine, and the bussers were so well trained they could make a wine recommendation. They could ask, "Did you enjoy that? Can I bring you another? Or is there something else that I can get you?" And look at what they're eating and actually make a recommendation that pairs with that meal. That takes training. And that busser could then go to the point of sale system, enter the order, go to the service bar, deliver the drink while the server for that table was in the kitchen. That's powerful. Where do you see that? Again, I dine out across the country so often. I've never seen training to that level. Okay, but it takes consistency. It takes making it fun, and it takes having regular daily pre-shifts. And I don't mean what's the chef special. I mean strategy sessions, how to read the table, how to figure out if the guests are in a hurry because they want to catch a movie or if it's a special occasion. or a birthday or something along those lines. It was about no order takers allowed. It was about suggesting that enhance the guest experience. So pre-shifts were absolutely mandatory, and reading the tables, assessing needs, and treating every guest like they were the most important guest in the place. That was so important to us. As well as your restaurant hooks. You know what a hook is. I talk about this all the time. What is unique? What is special? What is different about your restaurant that sets you apart from the competition? Super powerful to know this stuff. Train your team in what your hooks are. Talk about them in pre-shifts. I also had an exercise. Once a month, we did a more formal exercise. I call it how to turn $100 into $1,000. Maybe you've heard me talk about this before, but I've always believed that the restaurant business is show business. Ta-da! Okay, I used to tell my team, when the doors open for business, the curtain goes up, it's showtime, and you're not a busser, you're not a host, you're not a bartender or a server. You are an actor on stage. You're here to dazzle the guests and give them lots of reasons to come back again, tell their friends, and most of all, have an amazing experience. Not just have food and drink, but to have an experience, all right? So what happens when you go to a play or you watch a movie or even a TV show? Aren't there lots of what they call props, things that the actors use to bring the storyline to life? Well, same thing in your restaurant. There are lots of things you can use that are props that your team can literally bring to life in front of the guest to demonstrate it, to show them that they want it, and to spark their imagination. And that helps sell product. Okay, that is super, super powerful. Then we used to do pop quizzes all the time. I would randomly put these quizzes together and call people in 5 minutes early, or even in a pre-shift. Now, when I talk about pre-shifts, we're not talking about 20 minutes. We're talking about 5-minute quick strategy sessions. So whether you talk about, reading table or all that kind of stuff or the strategy, or you give them a pop quiz, it's all powerful. It keeps them on their toes. It keeps them knowledgeable. And it does not allow them to coast, It's pretty powerful. So I'd put a quiz together based on our menu knowledge, our restaurant knowledge, our product knowledge, and I would actually grade these things and hold them accountable for top results. And you know what? We sure did give amazing service, and we sure did have a competitive advantage. And we were known for that hospitality. We were known for that service, but we were also known for salesmanship because everyone was a salesperson. And these were profitable sales. Remember, I talked about profitable sales versus non-low profitable sales? Again, that was powerful. We costed out our menus. My team knew which items were the most profitable all the time. And then we redesigned our menus for maximum profit. So we didn't care what we were actually selling as long as we didn't have a waste problem, a spoilage problem, or even a theft issue. We virtually eliminated all that through efficiency. Okay, that was a profit leak that happened early when I started my restaurants, and I eliminated them all. All right, so that's super important. Okay, now we're going to talk about marketing. Ajinomoto is your answer to every busy dinner rush spent deep in the weeds. When hungry customers walk through your door, they expect good food that tastes homemade. But making every dish from scratch cuts into your profit, especially with the cost of ingredients and labor. That's where Ajinomoto Foods comes in. Ajinomoto has a huge catalog of fast, easy to prep, frozen Asian products that taste and look homemade. That includes classics like fried rice, dumplings, and onion rings, and new trendy fusion plates like kimchi chicken pot stickers. Choosing Ajinomoto is choosing over 100 years of proven expertise in the food service space. Choose to save time and money in your busy kitchen without compromising on the quality your guests expect. Learn about Ajinomoto at ajinomotofoodservice.com. I often say that many different restaurant marketing strategies or ideas are experiments. Why? Because so many restaurants throw lots of money at these ideas that don't work. They don't know that they work. They can't track if there's any return on investment. They don't know where the business is coming from, if it's coming from that marketing idea, and what it costs them versus the return on that investment. Did they get a 2x, a 5x, a 10x return, or no return at all? They don't know because they can't track it. So there's some ways that we can get around this. I've always thought that all marketing ideas must be trackable. So there are influencers. We had concierges in bed and breakfast inns or hotels or, lodging properties, even bed and breakfast or Airbnb owners. Okay, they put our menus in all their properties. They had special ID cards that they could stamp the back. And if a guest brought that into the restaurant to get a special deal, then we would give that restaurant influencer, that Airbnb or that hotel, an incentive. Okay, if we could track where it was coming from, if they stamped the back of those incentives, then we would give them trade back in the restaurant, 10% before tax. That was super, super powerful. You wouldn't believe that some of these people, I called them strategic alliances also because they weren't just hotels. They weren't just individual influencers. They were businesses that had high volume. I remember when I first came up with this idea, I would drive around to look at different businesses in my community, especially when I opened a new restaurant. And I would sit in parking lots and I would literally count traffic walking in and out of dry cleaners and movie theaters and tanning salons and retail stores. And any business that had constant traffic walking in and out, I used to introduce myself to that owner. And I'd say, I'm Roger and I'm opening up a new restaurant, and I'd really love to introduce your customers, your guests, if you will, to my new restaurant. And here's an incentive to, give them something of special value that they can redeem at the restaurant. And of course, people were going to spend money when they redeemed the coupon. And what were those things? They were cash cows. They were items that cost me very little money to serve the guest, but they had high perceived value. They looked amazing. They taste amazing. They smelled amazing. They had what I called wow factor. So there was value there. You wouldn't believe that some of these influencers, some of these businesses drove $15,000 in new business right off the bat to my new restaurant within a month or two. It was unbelievable. And it actually worked because we tracked those coupons. And of course, we gave the owners of those businesses 10% back in trade before tax. And they just loved to come into the restaurant and just sign the check. And they had a gift card, and they'd redeem the gift card, and they could use it for their spouse or their partner. They could give it to an employee as a special thank you for doing a great job. They could have a team party at the end of the week or whatever they wanted to do. And it was really, really awesome. It was a win-win-win situation. So we used influencers, we used strategic alliances, and then social marketing is very cost effective. You know this. You're probably doing this now. But I say all the time that I was not a social media expert back in the day when I owned these restaurants. I didn't know what to post, what platforms to post on, how often to post, if it was going to be repetitive, was it a certain time of day? But I knew that I had a person on my team, if not many people on my team, that did this all the time. They were experts. And pretty soon people jumped on it. My team members would take really cool videos inside the restaurant of the place packed and the special promotions we were having and the vibe of the place and a cash cow or a hook. And they'd take a picture of this and they'd come up with a post and they'd spread it all over social media. And that drove traffic. And people would tell us, oh, I saw you on Facebook, or I saw, oh, that was such a cool video. We had all these hooks, birthday parties. We had these candles that shot a ring of sparks. What a show. We used to sell these things for like $4 a piece, and we got them online on eBay, and you can get a whole case of them for very little money. And we sold them for $4 a piece. It became an additional profit center. And it was a big birthday thing because whenever someone announced they had a birthday, the team would say, hey, we got these special candles and it's going to create a spectacle. And most people said, yeah, we want to see that. And then the team would carry the cake in, it would have the candle, and they'd light it halfway to the table. And then now they're walking in a procession through the dining room or through the bar with this candle shooting the sparks. And then we'd sing happy birthday. We came up with a unique song, not the traditional happy birthday song, something unique and different, very catchy. But then when it was over, when the candle finally went out, the entire restaurant erupted in applause, okay? And that was marketing, and that was a hook. So you can't have too many hooks because hooks are marketing, okay? That is super, super powerful. So we're talking about all restaurant marketing must be trackable. You must know where the business is coming from. You can use influencers. You can use businesses. You can use what I call strategic alliances, but think outside the box, I also had this lottery ticket idea that was super powerful. It wasn't just the incentive coupon. It was also a custom branded lottery ticket that had scratch off squares. You probably heard me talk about those. That drove tons of business in for a second visit. We passed those out in the check presenter after the guest paid their check, okay? After they had already spent the money, and it was just another incentive to get them to come back. We had a fancy sweepstakes name. It had our logo, our colors, our branding, and it looked like a real scratch-off lottery ticket. And then we started tracking those coming back. Between the two coupons I talked about, the incentive coupon and the lottery ticket, each of those had an average check spend of $85 for the cost of a cash cow, which was less than $1. And it was unbelievable how popular they were. So yeah, out of the box thinking, get creative, get resourceful. It's super easy to do. And even, brainstorm with your team these great ideas. I also used to incentivize my team that were in the trenches every single day to come up with ideas or anything you see that you think might be a new sales idea, something that'll increase our profits, something that'll decrease our costs, something that'll stop breakage of plates or glassware, whatever it is. If you can give me a new idea and if I can track a bottom line performance or an ROI to that, I'm going to give you an incentive for as long as you work for me and as long as it continues to drive money to the bottom line, I'm going to give you a piece of the action. I asked and they came up with these ideas and then they were incentivized and they became what I call intrapreneurs in my business. They cared enough to drive new business. They cared enough to come up with creative ideas. They cared enough to run the place like they owned it and had to pay for it. And that was super, super powerful. And what happened? Those people got promoted. They got new areas of responsibility, and then they were incentivized to take on new responsibility. Just know, there are lots of people that work for you that are looking to move up. They're looking for opportunity, and if they stagnate in a position and they get bored of it, they're going to leave, either for your competition or another industry entirely. We saw all that happen, okay? You don't want that to happen. You want low turnover in your business. You don't want high turnover because that's another profit leak, okay? Build longevity, build team spirit. Maybe you've heard this story, a box, and 4 letters on it, MMDD. What's MMDD? It stands for Made My Day Difficult. They encourage their team at the end of every shift to drop a note in the box, either anonymously or put your name to it. What was a challenge? What went wrong that we can fix that won't happen again? And people dropped these things in the slot and they fixed everything as it happened. And it made the team just so much more productive and so much happier because they eliminated all the pain points that the team went through in a shift. I thought that was genius. I thought that was a great idea. So maybe you can use it in your restaurant, okay? So let's summarize. We talked about the profit leaks. We talked about the key performance indicators, knowing your critical numbers and having a feel for your restaurant, watching every penny come in, watching every penny go out, calculating your menu cost, calculating your daily break even, calculating your prime cost, how to keep a low food cost. We talked about all those things. We talked about training your team, no order takers allowed, sales stars only. Every person that interacts with a guest, whether you have a food truck or a fast casual restaurant or a full serve, every person should be an ambassador for your business. They should know your menu inside and out. They should be able to answer any questions, not say, oh, let me go ask my manager. You get the idea. That has got wow factor unto itself, okay? That is great guest service. That is a competitive advantage. And we talked about marketing that's trackable, not an experiment, not something that's dumping money out the window and you don't know if it's working. We're talking about trackable marketing. Know your critical numbers. That's going to make a huge difference in your business, okay? Just know that all of the stuff I talked about today is at the Restaurant Academy at restaurantrockstars.com. If you want to put an inventory system in place, it's there. If you want to cost out your menu for maximum profit, it's there. If you want sales stars to train your team, it's there too. These trackable marketing ideas, the how-tos, how I did it step by step, it's there. The best part about the Academy is you can empower. I love that word empower. Don't delegate your team. Don't tell them what to do or how to do it. Empower them to learn your business and learn some critical part of it that they can execute and improve. And that's part of the Academy also. And you can actually track their progress and assign any lesson to any number of team members. Same price, okay? 2 ways to buy it, a monthly price or own it for life. And if you get the own it for life price, You also get 3 hours of coaching calls with me, and we'll talk about your challenges. We'll talk about anything in the academy. I'll help you improve your business. It's all at restaurantrockstars.com. Thanks for listening. I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Stay tuned. Stay well. Your biggest challenges are labor and shrinking margins. Both kill your profit. I help restaurants find and fix those leaks. Last year, I uncovered over $300,000 in lost profit in 2 independent restaurants and $885,000 in a 5-location pizza chain. I specialize in controlling costs to maximize profit, training managers to become leaders, training front of house staff to sell, and marketing that drives trackable, new, and repeat business. If you want more profit, less hours, and a dream team staff in your restaurant, book a free 30-minute profit strategy session with me. Email roger@restaurantrockstars.com. That's ROGER at restaurantrockstars.com.